This is the BBC. For details of our complete range of programmes, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.
Welcome to the latest global news, compiled in the early hours of the morning on Tuesday, the 12th of December. I'm Alex Ritson with a selection of highlights from across BBC World Service news today. Coming up, 3 American women have called on Congress to investigate their claims they were sexually harassed by President Trump.
I want to believe that as Americans we can put aside our political inclinations and admit that some things in fact do transcend politics, that we will hold Mr. Trump to the same standard as Harvey Weinstein.
The White House has described the allegations, which are not new, as absurd false claims. Also in the podcast, the mayor of New York has called the attempted bombing of one of the city's busiest transport hubs a terrorist attack.
Thank God the perpetrator did not achieve his ultimate goals. Thank God our first responders were there so quickly to address the situation.
Scientists bring new hope for hundreds of thousands with Huntington's disease.
My brother, who was the most brilliant lawyer of his generation, now is in a vegetative state. He's had the inevitable...
been voted the BBC African Footballer of the Year. But first to the United States. 3 women who've accused President Trump of sexual harassment and assault have called on Congress to investigate their claims. Speaking at a news conference, the women urged politicians to hold Mr. Trump to the same standard as other men recently accused of wrongdoing, such as the disgraced film producer Harvey Weinstein. The White House has again described the allegations, which are not new, as absurd false claims that are politically motivated. More details from our Washington correspondent, Regina Vijanathan.
Jessica Leeds, Rachel Crooks and Samantha Holvey first spoke out during last year's election. But in the wake of the Harvey Weinstein scandal, they don't want their stories to be forgotten. In an interview with BBC News, Jessica Leeds said she was groped by Mr. Trump decades ago while she sat next to him on a flight.
The next thing I know, Trump is over me like a wet blanket. And he is kissing and he's fondling and everything. And the next thing I realized was he was putting his hand up my skirt.
More than a dozen women have accused Mr. Trump of sexual misconduct. He strongly denies all of the claims and has repeatedly called the women liars. Rachel Crooks called for Congress to hold the president to account.
I want to believe that as Americans we can put aside our political inclinations and admit that some things in fact do transcend politics for their reprehensible behavior. Therefore, I ask that Congress put aside their party affiliations and investigate Mr. Trump's history of sexual misconduct.
In the last week alone, 3 members of Congress have been forced to resign over accusations of sexual misconduct. In this current climate, many are asking why the same pressure hasn't reached the gates of the White House. An investigation by a Republican-led Congress looks unlikely, and to many voters, it's not a concern. Remember, Donald Trump won the election in spite of these allegations.
Regina Vijanathan in Washington. In New York, police are holding a man who is suspected of exploding a crude pipe bomb next to New York City's busiest bus station during Monday's rush hour. He injured himself and 3 passers-by. The mayor, Bill de Blasio, described it as an attempted terrorist attack. The police have named the suspected perpetrator as Akayed Ullah, a young Bangladeshi who'd moved to the US several years ago. From New York, Nick Bryant reports.
The device was detonated at 7:20, the height of rush hour, in an underground passageway that connects America's busiest bus terminal to Times Square. The moment was caught on CCTV footage. There's a large cloud of smoke, and as it clears, a man can be seen lying on the ground. Police said it was a homemade low-tech bomb, fastened by Velcro to the suspect's body. An attempted suicide attack that left the bomber himself with the worst injuries, burns and cuts. 3 others, including a police officer, were treated afterwards for minor injuries. Hunter Ferez was on a train which passes through 42nd Street when the blast happened.
Over my headphones I heard this loud bang. And then I looked out the window and I saw a couple of police officers walking towards the sound, and then all of a sudden just everybody took off running in the opposite direction. Everyone, it was sort of like freaking out on the train, and people were like laying down, and some people were like, it was hard to block the entrance because it's fairly crowded when you're commuting in the morning.
The suspect has been identified as Akayed Ullah, a 27-year-old thought to be from Bangladesh, now living in Brooklyn. Police said he uttered a statement but didn't go into details. Coming at such a busy time in such a congested place, the intent seems to have been to cause maximum destruction. The Port Authority bus terminal serves 65 million passengers a year. This could have been so much worse, said New York's Mayor Bill de Blasio.
There are no additional known incidents at this time. There are no additional known activities. We will wait for a fuller investigation, of course, but at this point in time, all we know of is one individual who, thank God, was unsuccessful in his aims.
The speed at which this city started moving again not only speaks of its determined resilience, but also the creeping normalisation of these kind of attacks in the world's major cities. New Yorkers have long known their transportation systems are vulnerable.
Nick Bryant in New York. President Putin has said Donald Trump's decision to recognise Jerusalem as the capital of Israel could erase the prospects for peace with his Turkish counterpart, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Mark Lowen reports from Istanbul.
2 years ago, they almost came to blows when Turkey shot down a Russian jet over its airspace. But today, Presidents Erdogan and Putin held their 8th meeting this year, both stressing their joint positions on issues including the US recognition of Jerusalem as the Israeli capital. Vladimir Putin said it could erase the prospects for peace. Recep Tayyip Erdogan spoke of Arabs martyred by Israeli police, earlier denouncing Israel as a terrorist state and the US as having blood on its hands. They also discussed Syria. From having backed opposite sides of the war, both now cooperate closely. As Turkey's ties with the West have strained, it's moved closer to Russia. Mr. Erdogan's critics lament the growing coziness between two authoritarian leaders.
Mark Lowen in Turkey. It's a neurodegenerative disease with no cure, blighting families around the world as patients have a 50-50 chance of passing it on to their children. The disease kills sufferers within 20 years. But now researchers at University College London have been able to correct the defect that causes Huntington's for the first time. Professor John Hardy, who won the prestigious Breakthrough Prize for his research into the genetic causes of brain disease, says it's an important moment.
In this trial, they looked at a biochemical measurement of whether the drug had the effect it wanted, and it had the biochemical effect they hoped for. I really think that this is potentially the biggest breakthrough in neurodegenerative diseases for the last 50 years.
Scientists say the research may also have implications for treating brain diseases similar to Huntington's, such as Alzheimer's. Our health and science correspondent James Gallagher was given exclusive access to the trial.
Huntington's disease leaves patients in permanent decline, altering their behaviour and affecting their ability to move and think. Some describe it as Parkinson's, Alzheimer's and motor neurone disease rolled into one. 51-year-old Peter Allen is in the early stages and took part in the trial.
You end up in a kind of almost like a vegetative state. So it's a horrible end.
Peter has seen his mother Stephanie, Uncle Keith and grandmother Olive die from Huntington's. Tests show his sister Sandy and brother Frank will all develop the disease. The siblings have 8 children. Each has a 50-50 chance of inheriting the disease too. Peter says it's not easy to live with.
The whole idea of having, something that is degenerative is quite difficult. When you've got something that's degenerative, you know that, the last day was probably better than the next one's going to be.
The disease is caused by an aberration in a section of DNA called the Huntington gene. The error corrupts a healthy protein and turns it into a killer of brain cells. The therapy silences the gene by blocking the messages it sends to the cell's protein-making factories.
So we're just getting the syringe ready. It'll take a few seconds and then the doctor's going to start the injection and he'll let you know.
46 patients had the drug injected into the fluid that bathes the brain and spinal cord. The approach, called gene silencing, was shown to be safe and lowered levels of the protein in the brain. Professor Sarah Tabrizi, the director of the Huntington's Disease Centre at UCL, said the results were of groundbreaking importance.
So I've been seeing patients every week in clinic for nearly 20 years. I've seen many of my patients over that time die, and for the first time we have the potential, we have the hope of a therapy that one day may slow or prevent Huntington's disease completely.
Doctors are not calling this a cure. More research is needed to establish whether lowering levels of Huntington will change the course of the disease. A decade of animal research suggests it should. The approach may apply to other neurodegenerative diseases. Patients with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's have abnormal proteins building up inside their brains. Trials are now planned to see if gene silencing can help dementia patients. Neurodegenerative diseases have been one of the most intractable problems in medicine. The work on Huntington's is far from complete, but now there's hope.
That report by James Gallagher. You're listening to Global News, the most important stories and the best interviews and on-the-spot reporting from the BBC World Service. And we love telling you about other BBC World Service podcasts. What really goes on inside a woman's prison, and how do the dynamics differ from male prisons? The latest episode of The Conversation meets two women who are both in charge of prisons in different parts of the world. The Conversation is the podcast that's all about bringing together two inspirational women with incredibly difficult jobs who are connected by a shared life experience. Search for The Conversation wherever you're hearing this. Now to India, and the country's main opposition, the Congress Party, has confirmed Rahul Gandhi as its leader. Mr Gandhi is the great-grandson of India's founding Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. Congress has been in opposition since 2014, when it suffered a crushing defeat by the right-wing BJP under Narendra Modi. So is Mr Gandhi the person to return Congress to power? Sanjoy Majumdar reports from Delhi.
There's plenty of excitement outside the headquarters of India's Congress Party, as Rahul Gandhi has just been named as the party's new president, taking over from his mother Sonia Gandhi. Elected, unopposed, endorsed by the entire rank and file of the party. There are people dancing outside the party headquarters. They're bursting firecrackers.
What Rahul Gandhi will offer will be a vision for India in which 1.2 billion people see their dreams become reality.
It is a really big deal to head a political party like the Congress, and I believe that under Rahul Gandhi it will be re-energized.
It was seen as an inevitable step. He is the current vice president of the party. He has been the face of the party for some time now.
Rahul Gandhi belongs to India's most politically influential dynasty, the Nehru-Gandhi family. His great-grandfather was the country's first prime minister. His grandmother Indira Gandhi and his father Rajiv Gandhi also held the post. Both were assassinated. And Rahul takes over the presidency from his Italian-born mother Sonia Gandhi. Journalist Aditi Phadnis explains why the family has such a hold over India's grand old party.
The family is seen as a set of people who have sacrificed for the party. They are the final court of appeal. There is nothing beyond the family.
But is the Congress Party's move in sync with 21st century India? Political commentator Aarti Jarat.
I think we're looking at a different India today. You know, in the 21st century, the middle class is much larger. You have many more educated people. You have a whole young population that comes in as voters. So I think India is changing.
But he faces a massive challenge. Congress is now a severely diminished force, finishing a distant second to Prime Minister Narendra Modi's BJP in the last elections. Mr. Modi is a powerful and charismatic leader who loses no opportunity to tear into his political opponent. But in recent weeks, Rahul Gandhi has appeared to take the fight to Mr. Modi. Congress party politician Sachin Pilot believes he will pose a threat.
To my mind, Congress is the only organization politically that can take on BJP pan-India. And therefore you need a focused, a pivotal leadership that will galvanize not just the Congress but entire opposition parties to take on the massive resources that the BJP has deployed in all its election campaigns.
The next general election is less than 2 years away. Not much time for the new president to resurrect his party and mount a challenge against Narendra Modi.
Sanjoy Majumdar in India. The authorities in Ivory Coast have announced plans to pay soldiers nearly $26,000 each to leave the army. More than 4,000 troops are due to leave in the next 4 years. I've been finding out more from the BBC's Tom Arfesi, who spent 10 years